So I'm going to just do a quick video on rents before moving on to an analysis of what happens when we take a sector out of society in the next video. That way we'll have an idea of the impact of fixed costs. Fixed costs are really important because they're different costs associated with production in that when production changes, so do the associated costs of production. So if we're producing less clothes, the cost of the materials that go into the clothes will be less too. So you're using less cotton, you're using less labour to make the clothes. In general, it won't be the exact same proportion as the change in production, just because you get discounts for bulk buying and you don't want to sack your workers every time there's a dip in demand, and legislation means that you're going to pay them the same each month. That it's kind of a fixed cost in that sense as well. But we can say that in general, if production falls, so will all of the costs that are variable. Fixed costs are costs that don't change regardless of how much you're producing. So for example, water might be a fixed cost in some places, where people are paying a fixed amount regardless of how much they use. And of course, rents are also fixed. A landlord really doesn't care about how much food is being sold in a restaurant, or how many bottles are being produced by a factory, or whether the people living in a house are working and are able to afford the rent. So people pay the same rent every month regardless of what's sold or how much work they do. Okay, so I'll go back to the input-output tables again. Just before I start, somebody complained about the fact that I'm not putting it in proper matrix algebra format, so I've done that this time for any annoyed mathematicians that might happen to watch. So instead of having the pigs which represent the profit over on this side, we've mirrored the columns. But I'm still having profit up at the top, so pigs are still going to be the profit product. They're representing the luxury consumption, and we're still having everything else very simple. So like the wheat is the wage product, workers only buy wheat, capitalists only buy pigs, and then you've got iron as a capital input down the bottom. In the last video we showed that the column was determined, so we had pretend this was the hospital a second, we knew which costs the hospital were going to have, so we knew what it needed in order to run. But we didn't know what it was going to add along this row to the profit, and that was allowed just to vary. But here it's different because both the row and the column are going to be fixed. Let's say that we're going to know how much the landlords are going to pay out on providing the service that they provide, which is fixing the house when it breaks. So again, I'm just making these numbers up. Let's say that the landlord's going to pay out £10 in iron to repair the house, and since the landlord is probably not going to repair the house themselves, they're going to pay out for workers to repair it instead. So let's say that they're going to pay out £9 here. But here we also know what's going to happen along these columns, because we know how much rent is being charged in each sector. It's a fixed cost every month, it's always the same. So let's just make some more numbers up. Let's say they're going to charge £13 to pig sector, they're going to charge £16 to the wheat sector, and they're going to charge £8 to the iron sector. And let's say that they're not going to charge any rent to themselves, so £0 here. But we don't yet know what's happening here, so let's leave that for a second. So now let's add up the rows and columns again and see where we're at. So this bottom row totals £31. This one is £54. This one's £37. And we're not sure of this one yet. But just for a second, let's just add up the others. 15 plus 9 plus 6 is 30. So let's just put 30 for now in brackets. And down the columns, so for the pig industry, we've got £43. In the rent industry, we've got £19 of costs. In the wheat industry, we've got £61. And again, below the line is what you would normally call costs, and above the line is what you would normally call profit, but they're all inputs. And finally, in the iron industry, That's £29. So now these rows and columns no longer add up, so we can see that something isn't right. So again, this isn't about equilibrium, it's not something that corrects itself over time. It's a logical error, because if these rows and columns don't total the same, that means that the selling price and the buying price would have to be different, which is not possible. You can mark this table up as an equilibrium table if you want, but in this case I'm just not doing that. So we can see that in the iron industry, for example, we've got £29 worth of inputs and we've got £31 worth of outputs. So one of these rows has to change. And supposing that things are working as they should, it should be that the distribution of the pigs changes, rather than the business trying to cut costs of, say, their labour or material costs to keep profit high. If they do cut other costs, it's going to have a wide-scale secondary effects on society. And there are very interesting consequences to this in terms of bubbles and economic instability. That's a video for a different time. So here where we have £31 coming into the iron industry, you'd expect, because there's no savings or anything in this table, and everything is just being spent out again, and we're not doing accumulation, it's very simple, then one of these rows has to add on too, and it's going to be the pig industry, because we're going to allow that to, there's going to be more profit coming to this industry now. So let's cross out this and we'll put 8. And now if we add all of this up, it's going to equal 31. So now these two are going to equal the same. The same is going to happen with the wheat industry. So they've got £54 coming in, but their total inputs are adding up to £61. So they're going to have to minus some of their profit off, and in this case it will be 61 minus 54 is 7. So 9 minus 7 is £2 profit they're going to have now. What about the rent industry? Well, we can see that they've got £37 coming in, and so far we've only got £19 worth of inputs. So the final input, which is the profit, is going to end up as 18. So now, just to find out if the pig industry is correct or not, we're going to have to add up these profits. So we've got 18 plus 2 plus 8 plus 15. So that's now £43. And as you can see down the column here, there's £43 as well. So now our table is adding up. This one's now 37, this one's now 54, and all of the rows and columns equal each other. So we can also see that one of the functions of profit, if it's working correctly, is to give a kind of priority ordering for the rows in this table. So profit, or the pigs, the luxury goods, should vary first, before labour costs and material costs. But one of my conjectures is that as a society we should be able to democratically decide which rows are the socially most important ones and allow the ones that are least important to vary. For instance, the rent would never vary, but maybe we don't think that rent is so important. So for instance, rent is very hard to make it reduce when income isn't high enough. In fact, it's one of the most solid of the costs. So this ends up being like a really high priority category in terms of how the structure of this table works. So mostly people are gonna even vary their wage and iron inputs before they are able to vary the rent, because they can't get a rent reduction. And as you can see, the amount of profit that rent is getting is quite high in this imaginary society. But that's also the case in the UK if you look at the input-output tables. So I would say we possibly need to rethink this rent relationship. And this has also become very clear in the COVID crisis, because these costs don't change even when all of the other costs are wiped out of an industry. So that's the end of the foundation, which includes rent. In the next video, I'll move on to what happens when we remove some sectors of society.